Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Embrace the Mud podcast. Today, we are going to be diving into a topic that I know affects many of us, even when we don't realize it. And that topic is self-betrayal. Today, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some of the signs that you are self-betraying in your relationship and what you can do to break this habit. So let's dive in. You are listening to the Embrace the Mud podcast, where we discuss all things related to healthy, joyful, and life-giving relationships. Why focus on relationships? Because the quality of our intimate partnerships and close connections influences our health, happiness, and longevity more than anything else in our lives. Relationships matter a lot. So together, let's jump into the mud, aka our messy relationships, pull some weeds, plant some seeds, and create an enriching environment where strong relationships can take root. I am your grateful host, Dara Posner. I am a relational disaster working toward relational mastery. I am also a positive psychology coach, a relational mindset coach, a blogger, and now a podcaster. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Embrace the Mud podcast, where we discuss all things related to healthy, joyful, life-giving relationships. If you are a fan of this podcast, please subscribe, follow, like, review, and share. Your engagement in this way is crucial to the success of the podcast, and I appreciate you taking just a few seconds to support my mission, which is to help people like you flourish in life and love. All right, so let's start by unpacking what we mean by self-betrayal. So simply put, this is when you compromise your own values, standards, needs, and boundaries in order to please or accommodate your partner. And it might seem like the path of least resistance, but it can actually have some pretty profound impacts on your relationship. Self-betrayal can turn your partnership into a bit of a house of cards. It really, weakens the foundation. And when you're not true to yourself, you're building a connection on this shaky ground. It hampers your ability to communicate honestly, fosters resentment, and can eventually lead to emotional burnout. I would say that emotional burnout is a key feature of recognizing that you may have some habits of self-betrayal. So if you're currently feeling emotionally burned out in your relationship, please listen along and see if any of the following behaviors aren't ones that you can maybe recognize in yourself. And then don't worry, because we're going to talk about how you can get yourself out of these patterns and into healthier ways of being in your relationship so that your internal relationship is fortified and your relationship with your partner is strengthened as well. Okay, so what are some examples of self-betraying behaviors? The first one I want to talk about is ignoring your boundaries. This is when you are saying yes to things that actually make you uncomfortable or for whatever reason you're just not okay with, and you're doing that to avoid conflict in your relationship. If you're someone who really fears conflict or sees it as a bad thing, or is sort of programmed to experience conflict as very, very threatening, then it's much more likely that you are going to ignore or cross your own boundaries inside of your relationship. And we don't want to do this because we want to show up authentically, be self-honoring in our relationship, and be able to express to our partners what is a true yes for us and what is a no for us. And by the way, you can say yes to things that you're uncomfortable with without doing so explicitly. Like if you're not saying no when that's what you really want to say, you're saying yes. And then in turn, you're ignoring your boundaries. The second way that we self-betray is that we suppress our feelings. If you are holding back your emotions or your opinions because you are in fear of your partner's reaction, then this is an act of self-betrayal. And I get it, you guys, this one has been a big one for me, this whole walking on eggshells thing, because, you're trying to avoid your partner's reactivity. I have experienced that a lot. And I hate to be the one to tell you that while it's really, really easy to blame the other person, to blame their reactivity for why you walk on eggshells, the truth is the reason you walk on eggshells is because you haven't cultivated the capacity to let other people have their feelings. It feels threatening to you when somebody, gets angry or frustrated with you. And some partners who are, pretty emotionally immature will have these blow-ups or throw tantrums. And that can be really, really stressful, especially if you're somebody who hasn't done the inner work of really being able to stay centered and grounded, even when someone else around you, is having an emotional reaction. Now, I want to definitely insert a very important thing here, which is that if you are with a partner whose reactivity makes you fearful of being physically attacked, or even just like intimidated with, behaviors like posturing or blocking doorways or anything like that, anything that could be classified as like domestic violence, that's not what we're talking about here, okay? I'm not talking about abusive situations, because the truth is, if you're in an abusive relationship, there's only one avenue for you, and that is to get to safety, which is to get out of that dynamic as soon as possible. But what we are talking about here is, we have difficulties being in the presence of other people's intense emotions. So in order to stop self-betraying, while, we like to think, well, if we could just get that other person to stop being reactive, then I don't have to self-betray. But the only thing you can do is work on developing the capacity to be alongside, not engage in, but to be there in the presence of someone else's high emotions or, intense emotions, and recognize that what's truly important is that you honestly express yourself, that you share how you feel, and that you state what it is that you really think, because healthy relationships require authenticity. We have to be honest. And that also then creates the conditions. Not that this is your job. It's not your job to create the conditions for the other person to wrestle with their reactivity. But when we're honest, when we're authentic, it does create the conditions for both people to do the inner work necessary to make progress and move beyond those experiences. So if you are suppressing your feelings, this is a habit of yours where you just hold things in, you don't share openly what it is that you're feeling or thinking, then this is your invitation to make a commitment to stop doing that, to, find healthy ways to express yourself, and then to let other people have their feelings, to let other people have their reactions, whatever they might be. Okay. The third example of self-betraying behavior is prioritizing your partner's needs over your own. If you are continuously putting your partner's needs ahead of your needs, knowing full well that this is not sustainable, then this is a self-betraying behavior. And of course, in relationships, there are times where, I make a sacrifice, and my partner makes a sacrifice. But that's the key, is that, we are mutually sometimes sacrificing for the other person. And that's normal and that's healthy. But when you are continuously the one who is neglecting their own needs in favor of the other person's needs, that's what we're talking about here. In a relational dynamic, what we always want to be striving for is, finding an answer to the question, how can I take care of me and you at the same time? So we put our needs, our preferences, our desires on par with those of our partner. And we bargain and we negotiate, and sometimes we have to compromise. That's my last resort. But you want to be forthcoming and honest about what it is that your needs are, and making sure that they have a place at the table. Okay, and the fourth example I want to share with you today, that is an example of self-betrayal, is neglecting self-care. Oftentimes what happens is we get into a relationship and we begin to lose ourselves in that relationship. And what that looks like is, those wonderful self-care routines we used to have kind of fall by the wayside, and all of the activities that we once enjoyed, we don't really pursue anymore. And those friendships, that we were really valuing and cultivating at a certain time before we entered into the relationship are, maybe a little lost now or completely non-existent. And what we want to do to rectify that is to re-engage in our self-care routines, to reconnect with the activities that we really love and pursue our own hobbies and interests, things that are, outside of the relationship that we do for ourselves, to fortify ourselves, to enhance our own well-being, and to connect with ourselves on a regular basis. Okay, so now let's talk about, why do we do this? Why do we self-betray, right? Because it's not like we enjoy it, right? I mean, it's not fun. It's not something that we deliberately sign up for. We're like, this is how I'm going to go about this. No, often it's a mix of, sometimes societal pressure, or does it desire to be the quote unquote perfect partner, or the fear of being alone. Many of us carry this abandonment wound that then puts us on track to some of these self-betraying behaviors, if not all of them. Plus, conflict can be pretty intimidating, and self-betrayal can feel like the easier way out. But here's the good news. You can absolutely break free from this cycle of self-betrayal. It's a lot like breaking out of an escape room. It's challenging, but it's very, very rewarding. So how do you do that? Well, first and foremost, it starts with self-awareness. You need to take some time out to reflect on your own needs, on your standards, your values, and your boundaries. Get back in touch with clarity around what's truly important to you. Understanding yourself is like having a compass that will guide you inside of your relationship. Next, it's time to embrace some serious communication skills. We're talking about open, honest, and respectful conversations that you want to have with your partner, because they are not a mind reader. So you need to express to them what it is that you feel, what it is that you need, what it is that you are and aren't okay with, what you want, and so forth. Being able to do this and willing to do this, even though it can feel so risky sometimes, is the key to creating a truly healthy connection with the person that you love. And let's not forget about the power of self-care. Remember those activities that light you up. They refuel you. They re-energize you. So you want to reintegrate them into your life. Always remember that self-care is not selfish. You are refueling your own tank whenever you engage in self-care practices so that you have more to give in your relationship. And lastly, give yourself a break. Perfection is not the goal here. This is all about progress. So be patient with yourself. And if you really struggle in this area, do not be afraid to seek the support of a counselor or an experienced coach like myself. Sometimes, having that extra help, that external support, can really help you get over the major humps when you're really locked into some negative patterns that don't serve you or your relationships. Okay, well, we have covered a lot today, and I hope that, this episode has left you feeling empowered to break free from self-betrayal. Your relationship should be a partnership, not a sacrifice. So I invite you to embrace your true self, to communicate openly and honestly, and to practice self-care. I know that you've got this. All right, well, I will be back very soon with another episode here on the Embrace the Mud podcast. In the meantime, if you want to stay connected to me, please hook up with me on Instagram. My handle is @EmbraceTheMud, and I would love to connect with you on there. As I said, I'll be back very soon with another episode. In the meantime, please, please, please remember that you are wired for love and connection. You are capable of love and connection. You are worthy of love and connection. I'll see you next time.